Today, we're digging into a pretty fascinating mystery that's been bubbling up online. It's a question that makes you stop and think about your own town, and it's this: where are all the new cemeteries?
I mean, really think about it. You see new houses going up all the time, right? New stores, new roads. But a brand new cemetery from scratch? I bet you can't picture one. And if you can't, well, you are definitely not alone.
And this is the question that's at the heart of this whole thing. It sounds a little dark, maybe even a little funny, but it points to a genuinely weird observation that has totally captured the internet's imagination.
Yeah, this wasn't just some random shower thought. It became a full-blown viral thing. People on social media started pointing it out, and suddenly millions of people were like, wait a minute, that's true. You see comments like these everywhere. There's this collective feeling that the number of graveyards we see just doesn't make sense. It feels like we're still using the same ones that have been around forever. And that just seems impossible, right?
So, naturally, this feeling of something's not right quickly turned into people trying to do the math. They started digging into the numbers to see if this weird feeling could actually be proven with data.
And the argument is pretty simple. If something really strange is going on, you should be able to see it in the numbers. You look at population data, death rates, and the amount of land we have, and there should be a huge, obvious hole.
Okay, so the calculation that really fueled this theory goes something like this. Using public data, people estimated about 355 million deaths in the US over a 200-year period. Now, let's assume 80% of those people were buried. That means you'd need space for 284 million graves. The problem? All the cemetery land in the US combined only has room for about 170 million. And that calculation leaves this staggering gap. Over 100 million missing graves. I mean, that's a number so huge you can't help but ask, where on earth did all those people go? And this is where the conspiracy theories really take off. If the grave numbers don't add up, well, maybe the population numbers themselves are just fake. The idea is that maybe official census data is inflated for all sorts of reasons, like getting more government funding or more political power. But, okay, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's pull back and look at the practical side of this. Because the death industry, especially in the US, is kind of weird, and it turns out you can't just buy a field and decide to open a cemetery. A really big piece of this puzzle is how burials even work here. In the US, when you buy a plot, it's usually in perpetuity. That means forever. It's yours. This is totally different from, say, the European model, where you're basically just renting the space for a few decades. After the lease is up, that space can be reused. Our forever model, though, it creates a huge problem with land use. Because all that land gets locked up forever, the people who already own cemeteries have a pretty big reason to keep new people out of the business. It is a super heavily regulated industry with all kinds of strict codes and permits. Some insiders even say there's serious lobbying to limit new licenses, which makes it almost impossible to get a new cemetery started. Okay, so we've got the strange observation, the wild conspiracy math, and the weird realities of the burial business. So, let's pull back the curtain and look at the actual and honestly much simpler reasons you don't see new cemeteries popping up all over the place.
The reasons you don't really see them are pretty straightforward. First, it's way more common for an old cemetery to just buy the land next door and expand. Second, when new ones are built, they're usually way out on the edge of town where land is cheaper, so you're probably not driving by them every day. And third, building a cemetery is quiet. It looks more like a landscaping project than a huge construction site.
And then there's the simplest truth of all, the one that kind of unravels the entire mystery. The fact is, new cemeteries are being built. It's not super common, but it's not zero either.
For instance, a brand new veteran cemetery was finished in New York back in 2016, and a new Catholic cemetery opened up there in 2020. So they do happen, which proves that the initial observation, while it feels true, isn't an absolute fact. So, okay, the missing cemeteries idea might be more of a misperception than a massive conspiracy. But what it does do is point to a very real problem that's coming our way. We are genuinely starting to run out of space. Now, traditional burial is still what almost 40% of Americans choose, but cremation is now the top choice for the majority. And that change is happening for a lot of reasons: cost, religion, but a big one is the simple fact that there just isn't enough land. And this land shortage is on a clock. Projections are showing that by 2071, and that's well within the lifetime of a lot of us watching, major cities all over the country are going to be effectively full. No more room to bury anyone. And what's driving that deadline is this stark reality.
There are only about 144,000 acres of dedicated burial land left in the entire country. When you think about the fact that nearly 3 million people die each year, you can see how fast that land is going to disappear.
As one analyst put it, this isn't just some abstract problem for city planners anymore. For you and your family, securing a final resting place is actually becoming a real concern, almost like trying to buy a house in a crazy real estate market.
So, the viral mystery of the missing cemeteries might have a simple answer, but it uncovers a much deeper and more complicated question. This American idea of a forever resting place is smashing up against the hard reality of finite space. And it really forces all of us to think about what's next. Thanks for watching.